The Seek infection is the most deadliest thing in the whole game, especially after Seek infected Queen Grumble at the end of floor 2, but will Figure get infected in floor 3? Before even talking about the infection, we have to talk about something people still argue about, which is whether Figure is even returning in floor 3 at all. The reason this is extremely likely has nothing to do with guessing. It comes from looking inside the castle itself. If you dig into the castle's structure and actually look what's inside the map, there's already a massive blob of Figure's flesh sitting there before any player reaches the area. That means Figure isn't arriving later, he's already there. Something moves him there, or he somehow reached the castle before the player ever arrives. How that happened is still completely unclear. Maybe he travelled through some kind of pipe system connecting areas. Maybe something related to the red light moved him, or maybe he simply got there long before we reached the location. There isn't enough information to explain that part yet, but the important thing is that if he's already inside the castle, it confirms his story isn't done yet. Even though he barely appeared during floor 2, he's positioned to play a role again. Once we accept that Figure is likely present in floor 3, the next question naturally becomes whether Seek could infect him. This is where things get interesting, because Seek and Figure have never actually shown interacting directly. They exist in the same world, but we've never seen them standing in front of each other or competing for control of the same area. That means there is no direct example to point to, so the only way to answer this is by looking at how the Seek infection works and what Figure is physically made of. Figure is not an armoured creature or a plant-based entity. His body is exposed flesh. The description of him makes that very clear. He's a tall humanoid creature with a red fleshy texture covering most of his body. His head is basically a smooth sphere with no eyes or visible facial features, except for that massive circular mouth filled with randomly placed teeth. The rest of his body is a thin but long with claw-like hands and a ribcage shaped bone structure visible on his chest. There are glowing blisters along parts of his limbs and head, and a vein running across the top of his head. Whenever we open his mouth to holler, light actually comes from inside it. Now compare that to Seek. Seek isn't just a creature that runs during chases, it's a massive mass of black slime that can reshape itself to almost anything. We see it form full humanoid bodies, hands that grab players in hallways, sludge that fills the area like a dam, and worm-like shapes that burst out of surfaces. That alone shows the goo does not need specific environment spread. It attached to floors, walls, ceilings, debris, and even forms solid shapes that can move on their own. Because of that, the only real scenario where Seek couldn't infect Figure is if the slime simply refused to attach to him. But nothing we've seen suggests that would happen. The goo sticks to almost every surface it touches, it spreads, reshapes itself, and regenerates if it gets damaged. Developers have even confirmed that if Seek's body was somehow destroyed into pieces, it could simply regenerate again if it wanted to. That means once the goo sticks to something, it's almost impossible to remove. So when people ask if Seek could infect something made out of flesh like Figure, the realistic answer is yes. Flesh is actually one of the easiest surfaces for something like that to attach to. It isn't rigid like metal or stone. Seek's slime would be able to wrap around it, stick to it, and spread across the body. There's also another mechanic that indirectly supports this idea, which is the fact that Seek struggles with turning into objects that constantly interact with collisions. For example, developers mentioned that Seek would struggle to transform into something like a chair, because chairs are rigid and constantly interact with the environment in ways the slime can't replicate properly. But that problem wouldn't apply to a creature like Figure. Figure already moves organically. His body moves naturally when he walks. That means the goo wouldn't be forced to mimic rigid physics the same way it would with furniture or objects. So realistically, there isn't a strong reason why Seek couldn't infect Figure.
You weren't ready for this. The next thing to think about is, why would Seek even bother doing this? Well, right now, the number of entities that Seek actually controls is surprisingly small. The only confirmed ones are Screech and of course the infected Queen Grumble, which becomes the Queen Screech. And Screech itself is a part of the same species cycle as Giggle and the Grumble. Normally, the creature grows into a Grumble, but when Seek interferes with it during its growth stage, it becomes a Screech instead. That means that that Seek has only really taken control of one species so far. Even then, the only one we consistently see being used is Screech. The mines and the hotel are full of them, which strongly suggests that most of those Screeches are probably created through Seek's influence. Meanwhile, Queen Screech only appears once at the end of floor 2, when the infection actually happens. So if Seek infected Figure, that would be a completely different level of control. Figure isn't a small entity. Figure is one of the main threats players deal with in the game. He's huge and physically strong, so if Seek managed to infect something like that, it would give Seek a massive advantage. Now, the next logical question is, where would something like this even happen in floor 3? It probably wouldn't happen at the end of the floor, because we already saw the Queen Grumble infection at the end of floor 2. Repeating the exact same kind of scene again would feel predictable. If Figure does get infected, it would make more sense for it to happen somewhere earlier during a major encounter. It could happen at door 250, which would place the infection roughly around the middle of the floor instead of the end. That would allow for the game to introduce an infected version of Figure for the rest of the floor rather than only showing it once. If that infection does happen, then there's only one thing that definitely won't change about Figure. He still won't be able to see. The developers have already confirmed that Figure will never gain vision. His main mechanic is being blind, and that won't ever change, so the infection wouldn't give him sight. And one of the biggest theories we see around Seek is that the red light we see during its appearances is the thing actually controlling it. Seek itself might not even have its own mind. It's basically a massive body of slime with eyes scattered across it. There's no brain structure or anything suggesting it's thinking on its own. That opens the possibility that the red light is the real intelligence behind it. If that's the case, then infecting another creature like Figure would basically mean that the red light takes control of the body as well. Instead of Figure acting on its instinct way like he normally does, he could end up under the control of the red light. And once that infection happens, it's basically permanent. When Seek's goo sticks to something, it isn't temporary, it stays with it for life. So, if the same thing happened to Figure, that version of him would probably be permanent. The other effect would be increased strength. Seek's goo constantly reshapes itself and absorbs damage without really slowing down. During chases, Seek literally smashes into walls without caring about the impact. That suggests that goo doesn't experience damage the way normal entities do. If Figure's body becomes covered in that material, then he might gain some of that durability. His physical strength could also increase as well, simply because the goo is almost impossible to destroy. Seek's goo appears in huge amounts in certain areas like the dam. There is so much of it that the Seek we see during chases might only be a small portion of its total mass. If that's true, then the spreading of some of that slime onto other entities wouldn't weaken Seek very much. Instead, it could make him more powerful. So while we can't say with absolute certainty that Figure will be infected in floor 3, it's possible. Figure is already in the castle, and Seek has the ability to infect other entities, and the goo itself can attach to organic material without much difficulty. Let me know down in the comments below, and this was Doors Theory, where every door opens another mystery. See you next time.